I, that's me, I think. And good evening, everybody. Let's bow in. So we're continuing through the last few chapters of Volume 1 of the Profound Treasury. And next week is the last chapter. And after next week, we're going to take a break for the Thursday night class. Partly because in the Tuesday night class, Michael and I have decided to go back to volumes 1 and 2 to review, to help people better understand emptiness. And there are some chapters in both volumes that are very relevant. And we're going to go back to them next week and for about probably almost 2 months, I think. So we'll see what happens. But next week will be the last week for this class for a while. Okay. Also, I wanted to let you know that a Sangha member who happens to be my sister-in-law, she's married to my brother, Johanna Lund, is a filmmaker, along with some other people in our Sangha, the Hoaglands, and they all, Johanna Lund and the Hoaglands and my brother, all live in Halifax. And she works for the Canadian Film Board and has directed 3 films about death for the film board. The third one just came out. These are all available to view at a website called whenyoudie.org. And I invite you to take a look at it. It costs $20 to view the film on your computer, and then multiple people can sit there and watch it. And it goes towards helping defray the cost. She makes very little, from the whole thing. And but the first 2 films were quite terrific, and you can see them too. And the third one just came out, and I'm sure it'll be good. And also, if you do view it, they will also send you an invitation, I think on, I'm not sure what the date is, it might be the 24th, that sounds very soon, to a discussion with Johanna Lund and some of the other people involved in making the film. And this is not amateur. This is very professionally done with some very interesting people being interviewed in the course of it. And it's all about helping to prepare us for when we die.
And it's only available for a limited time.
Well,
that's what they say.
Available at some point. It'll be made more available again. Right now, it's only available, I think, until the 27th of February. I've been derelict in informing people about it. So check it out, whenyoudie.org. All right. Philip, shall we take it away?
Okay, welcome everyone. So this is chapter 67, Ego, the thought that we exist. Ego, the thought that we exist. Sometimes you just have to smile. I think, therefore I am. That has to be the least convincing argument ever made. One of the very first things we learn from meditation is that thoughts have no substance at all. They're like dreams, like rainbows, like ghosts. They are absolute illusion. I think, therefore I am. We are so profoundly mistaken. The whole thing is a hallucination. Well, this chapter is a short meditation of sorts, both a review and a preview. Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche begins this way. He says, when you understand egolessness, when there is no ego, when you have cut through ego, that is the cessation of suffering. It is the definition of nirvana. This is the third noble truth. Rinpoche continues, egoism begins with one thing, the thought that we actually exist, that we actually are here. We may have our doubts about ourselves, but we don't have any doubts about the notion of being. This shoddy fabrication we've created, this jerry-built construction we call ourselves, is constantly falling down, constantly being patched and constantly repatched. Rinpoche says this patchwork is what is known as mind, or sem in Tibetan. Remember back in chapter 36 when we were studying mind, sem was defined as the equivalent of mind as we generally think about mind. Sem is everyday regular mind. We're not talking about Rigpa here. This is garden variety mind, little mind, mind that depends on an object. In chapter 36, Sem is defined as synonymous with ego. Rinpoche says, this mind is not one solid continuous thing. Mind seems to be ongoing, but that is precisely because it is not one solid mind. Every fraction of a second, mind needs to nurture and sustain itself. Notice that these three are the definitions of emptiness, not unitary, not permanent, and not independent. And that's where we're heading ultimately, toward the understanding and later the experience that the nature of mind itself is emptiness. We constantly confirm ourselves through the sense perceptions. All 6 sense perceptions are constantly trying to sustain us, and all of them are just short moments of fickleness trying to overlap each other. Seeing is being overlapped by hearing, and hearing is being overlapped by tasting and smelling, and so on. Patch on top of patch on top of patch. Our mind is actually not one mind at all. It is minds, plural, lots of them, jumping around constantly, trying to take shape, trying to maintain themselves. This is the gross level of egolessness, not being one big thing. And that not one big thing is known as mind. Mind projects to various situations. We project out and we draw in. We develop extremely short memories, transferred in very small portions into what are known as habit-forming thoughts. We begin to have a memory bank consisting of all sorts of things. We begin to develop kleshas, passion, aggression, and ignorance. We act out our emotions, and we create the chain reactions of karma. This makes sense, right? Karma and kleshas have to have grasping to operate. The craving and grasping of ego, that's how everything starts. We project out and we draw in. So here we are again, back on the outer circle of the wheel of life, the 12 nidanas, cause and effect, the endless cycle of rebirth, stuck at the very first nidana, ignorance. The ignorance of the true nature of our very being. This is Sem, the garden variety mind. This is ego, an endless cycle of suffering. So, the question becomes, what is to be done? The chapter shifts focus here and begins to concentrate on the fourth noble truth. Rinpoche says, the whole thing is somewhat ridiculous. The only way to deal with this is through the practice of meditation. Through meditation, you begin to accentuate the notion of the non-existence of your whole being, your whole ego, your whole mind. Take a pinch of your mind and look at it. Who's looking at what? Stop for a minute to consider these sentences. There's a lot packed into them. We should be asking ourselves all the time, who is aware? Or better yet, what is aware? With what do we know anything? It's hard to do. It's like trying to look at your eyes with your eyes. It's like a flashlight trying to illuminate itself. Rinpoche says, peace, in terms of shamatha practice, does not mean bliss or euphoric state. It means that At last, there is some rest. By practicing shamatha, you develop sympathy for yourself. You actually have learned to be with yourself. You are simply learning to be. For the first time, you are trying to breathe out and in and simply exist. Just be. Look at your mind. Just be. These are very high-level teachings. Rinpoche concludes, in shamatha, there's a general sense of being unable to hold onto or grasp onto anything. And that seems to be okay, as long as you feel that such intangibility includes your own non-existence. Sitting removes psychological pain. By looking into your existence, survival mentality is cut out altogether. You begin to feel extremely raw and rugged right at the beginning. That is how a beginner's sitting practice should be, raw and rugged, with no excuses and no promises. He says, there is a world that does not exist in your mind, could not exist in your mind, which is revealed by exertion, by trying very hard. Continuous exertion gives you the first glimpse. As we practice, all sorts of things are turned up. Attempts to solidify our trips, various thought patterns, subconscious gossip and concepts. But we regard them as waves in the ocean, ripples in the pond. Step by step, as we go through all that, we begin to cut back the tremendous investment of ego and karma. He says, it is tremendous good news then. We can actually short circuit samsara with sitting practice. The approach here is to realize fully and learn to acknowledge egolessness. In fact, one definition of the Buddhist path altogether is egolessness. If you don't understand egolessness, there is no Buddhist path. When you understand egolessness, when there is no ego, when you have cut through ego, that is the cessation of suffering. It is the definition of nirvana. At the end of the chapter, Rinpoche is almost pleading with us. He finishes, what we're really concerned with is what we are now and how we could start as soon as possible to cut the samsaric root at this very moment. That seems to be our concern, and the sooner the better. That is the function of the practice of meditation. Basically, at its core, shamatha discipline is cutting the samsaric root. And that root is ignorance, the first nidana, the misperception of reality that takes the I to be real. Ego, the thought that we exist. Thanks for listening. Thanks for your practice. I'll turn this over to John.
Thank you, Philip. As I age, I have an increasing difficulty sleeping through the night. My body doesn't want to let me stay in bed for hours and hours. I have to get up and urinate. It's as simple as that. That's one thing. I can't hold the urine in for 8 hours. In fact, not even for 3 or 4 usually. And so when I get back into bed, oftentimes I have difficulty falling back to sleep. And I've begun to use some time ago, some months ago, maybe as long as a year ago, shamatha meditation. It helps me get back to sleep. And what I do is I use very, very basic shamatha. That is that I count the breaths, the out breaths. In breath, out breath, 1. In breath, out breath, 2. When you do this, you pick a point. I pick 7 at which to turn around. So I get in breath, out breath, 7. In breath, out breath, 1. What does this do? One thing is that it cuts through anxious thoughts of any kind. Oftentimes I find suddenly I realize that I'm at in breath, out breath, 15. What happened? What happened was that while I was counting, I got lost in a thought, a dream of some kind, an anxious dream. And suddenly I realize I've been dreaming, and I come back to the breath, and it cuts that dream. This is the most primitive and most basic way in which meditation cuts through ego. Ego is constant worry about oneself, constant attempts at self-aggrandizement, self-protection, all kinds of things like that. And those thoughts about oneself are anxious, and they keep one awake, me awake, worrying, hoping, wishing, all kinds of things, dreaming. And then one realizes, oh, I've been lost in thought, I have lost track of the breath, and you come back to the breath, the simple breath, out breath, 1. In breath, out breath, 2. And suddenly you realize what's happening is when you come back to the breath that way, it's cutting through these thoughts, which are always all about I. The thoughts about the breath are not about I, they're about the breath. They're just simple awareness of a fact that's happening, something that's happening. And they cut through the dreams. This is the fundamental way in which meditation attacks ego. Ego is a collection of dreams about I. And the I is very, what's the word? Insecure, unhappy, afraid, hopeful, wishful, always wanting things to be different. And that tension creates a lot of unrest and unhappiness. So when you come back to the breath, you're cutting through that and achieving peace, which is why this practice, shamatha, is called dwelling in peace. That's literally the translation of the Tibetan term for shamatha, which is shine. Shi is peace, and ne is to abide in. It's abiding in peace. We come back from those dreams, and we are in simple awareness. When we go on to Vipassana, we take that same principle of coming back from dreams, but now instead of focus on an object like the breath, could be another object, could be a mantra, Om, could be anything, could be a candle flame in front of you that you're coming back to. Instead of that single pointed focus on one object, when we practice Vipassana, we expand the awareness out and we come back from dreams to this, to awareness of the whole space of your computer screen, of your bottom on the chair. I'm going to be sitting in a chair, of the sound of this voice, of the space. And we're using that to bring us back from the ego, from the anxious dreams of ego, because that's what ego is. Ego is just a collection of dreams. Unhappy, always wanting things to be different. And even when they're happy, there's a faint little thing of, have I got it? Yes, I've got it. Have I got it? Yes, I've got it. And that little feeling of self-congratulation or self-affirmation has within it unhappiness, insecurity. So what happens is that when you get lost in these dreams, you really lose track of the world. So we're going to start with this chapter 68. You could get completely Just as I lose track of, my breath and suddenly realize that I'm at breath number 15 or 20 even, because I've lost track of the counting. I've gotten lost in some anxious thought. Same thing happens to us all the time in life. We lose track of our awareness of what's going on in the moment. Get lost in a dream. So he starts with this chapter 68, cutting through the numbness of ego. He says, when you're trying to meditate and trying to be aware of the breath or space or both, either one, breath is shamatha, space is vipassana, trying to be mindful of what's actually happening, you may find that you can't do it. You get lost, suddenly you're off in a dream. The reason? The intrusion of I, me, discursive thoughts. Discursive thoughts are always about I and me. You become numb, playing around in your private, imaginary, hallucinatory show. It could be all kinds of things. You could be dreaming about something terrible happening, like you're going to get sick, or you're going to lose all your money, or who knows what. You're going to get old and unattractive, and eventually die, and you can get lost in that fantasy. He says all sorts of things, dreams, visual and auditory and intellectual distortions of all kinds. The ignorance is the root of samsara altogether. The ignorance is going to bed mentally, going to sleep, stop being here. You're not awake, you're not present, but lost in some dream. He says it's a numbness, which is persistent, but workable. Shamatha is the first step. Focus on an object, coming back from the dream, cutting through discursive thoughts and coming back to mindfulness. It cuts the numbness of ego. Ego is so numb because it's lost in thought. Even when a thought is painful, ego is a numbing out. You're not here, not present, not awake. He says, the fundamental characteristic or essence of ego consists of ignoring your existence, which is full of the tremendous pain ego is of being I, worrying about I, hoping for I, wishing things were different for I. When you begin to realize and understand that I doesn't really exist, it's just a dream, it's just a thought, 100% of the pain is gone. You come back. And it's funny, I'll be lying there in bed, watching the breath. In breath, out breath, 2. In breath, out breath, 3. And I'll be thinking, this isn't working. And suddenly, I'll be waking up and it'll be 2-3 hours later because it just cuts through that terrible, anxious dreaming thoughts. He says you change your self-identity when you cut through these thoughts. You are made out of practitioner rather than of down-home Mr. or Mrs. whomever. So instead of being this person who's got this problem, nobody loves me, or I'm not rich enough, or I want to progress along the path and have people admire me, whatever it might be, then you come back to simple this. He says we have this thing inside us which we are carrying around. It's the whole me-ness, the identity. It's a part of me. It's accessory garbage, he calls it. And I can't get rid of it. The me-ness, the I-ness, a quality of heaviness. Me-ness, which may manifest as boredom or frustration or inadequacy or longing. Whenever one says I, there is a lack of self-confidence. That's really profound. When you say I, there's this feeling of fluttering, like, what's happening to me? Am I okay? Am I grounded? Am I safe? Whenever there's awareness of I, that cup pops up subtly or grossly. One is asserting oneself with a tinge of frustration and unfriendliness, anticipating pushback from other, anticipating some kind of unpleasantness from other, some kind of attack, some kind of diminution, some kind of unhappiness produced by other. The shamatha discipline of mindfulness, in this case watching the breath, but it can be any kind of mindfulness, can cut through the basic ignorance and unhappiness and uncertainty of I. By paying attention, you see the clarity and freshness of things. So we can do it as we're walking down the street and come back to your feet moving along the pavement. The car is going by, whatever it might be. After that, Vipassana cuts through the wantingness. You experience the totality around and within you, so you're not so caught up in want this and want that. That's the breathing out. You dissipate into space, and here we are. You breathe out, the breath goes out, it expands into space, you with it, and then here we all are in this space. And the whole thought of I, with all of its anxiety and unhappiness and fear, is gone for however long. It may be short, it may be longer. The sense of totality that you can experience going out and dissolving into space is connected with letting the atmosphere be there without I, without you. It's just this. So the idea of discriminating awareness, higher prajna, which basically means higher intelligence, being smarter, which develops out of vipassana, out of meditation. See, when we're so focused on our dreams, we're missing so much. And when we come back into this presence, into vipassana, we begin to see things and appreciate the subtleties of the phenomenal world as it arises around us. And it becomes a natural state of being rather than a person developing awareness. It's not important for you to develop awareness. What you are aware of is more important. That's really it. As you do this practice, it's not about me getting smarter. It's about the world becoming brighter, clearer, more vivid. He says this is how you can step out of egohood. By coming back, becoming more aware, awake, here and now. Try the meditation at night. It'll teach you a lot, taught me a lot, and still teaching me a lot. He said, when you develop awareness, there is no one who is aware because the I has disappeared into space. And that's true awareness here. If the I is still around, you're distracted by the I, thinking, how am I doing? Am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? Meanwhile, you could be tripping over your feet. He said it's like a movie screen, this whole awareness, without an audience. A movie screen without an audience. What a great image. It's like a television in an empty room. Just here it is, playing. It's doing it right now. Our whole life is doing it right now. Playing like a TV in an empty room because you can let go of the I, the watcher. With meanness, when I am present, you can't develop the subtleties of awareness because I am in the way. And there are three examples of how I gets in the way. When you're considering, when you're consumed with I, your awareness is either like one of three metaphors that are given. A cup that's turned upside down so that knowledge just bounces off it, can't be contained. A cup that's turned right side up so that it can hold things, but it's got a hole in the bottom. So you're here, but everything that is poured into this cup of knowledge drains out. And finally, it's a cup that is whole, up, right side up, but it has poison in the bottom. And when you pour stuff into it, it gets contaminated. And that's like you've got some kind of anger going on or unhappiness, and everything you see is colored by that poison. He says, when you are self-conscious, you become deaf and dumb. Isn't this the truth? You don't see or hear anything. You're so concerned with this, with me, that you don't see or hear anything else, or at least not much else, much less else, that you hear much less. This is the definition of ignorance. Awareness produces relaxation. You relax, you come present, and you begin to become much more intelligent. You can see what's going on in the world because you're not distracted by thoughts about I. At least not the dullness of ego fixation. That disappears for moments when you practice your meditation. So it's so important that you do it not only on the cushion, but you remember to come back in daily life. That's where it really begins to take hold. You do the same thing in daily life that you're doing on the cushion, coming back, realizing that you were dreaming, going out with awareness, and becoming awake, aware of this environment, of this world that we're moving through. Meditation in action. It really will strengthen, amp up your meditation practice, your progress on the path. He says, so awareness produces relaxation and prajna, at least not the dullness of ego fixation, and you may even experience the brilliance of egolessness, which begins to light things up. When ego goes, those distracting thoughts about I and other, the world appears much more clearly, brightly. He calls it the brilliance of egolessness. This is called, in the higher teachings, the tantric teachings, luminosity, Ursel in Tibetan. Is light and Sel is luminous. So it's luminous light. We begin to see the beauty of the world. And there's greater intelligence or prajna. So for instance, when you're really present and listening, and somebody's talking to you, you all know this, you've had people talk to you who are saying one thing, but they're not meaning it. They're thinking another. They're saying how much they like you, and what you can really hear behind them is they don't trust you, or they want to get something out of you. Well, if you're consumed with egotism, thinking about I, it's harder to hear that. But when you come present, you can begin to see the subtleties of what's actually happening in another person, what they're actually thinking behind what they're saying. They make all kinds of things. They may be telling you how irritated they are with you, and really what they're telling you is they want to love you. Who knows? But we become smarter when we begin to come present and out of ego, out of our thoughts, and into awareness. So he says you have greater intelligence of prajna. You're no longer blindfolded or stupefied by your thoughts, by your dreams. You are no longer involved with yourself all the time, because that's what the dreams are. They're all about me, 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 me. And when we cut through them and come out of them, me disappears, and we begin to become much more aware of and involved with the world. Greater head and shoulders. He always emphasized have good posture. That's why we do it. We emphasize posture when we sit. Good walk, good way of eating, and good way of talking. All of this helps with produce greater awareness. Vipassana is known as insight or awareness meditation. And with Vipassana, the possibilities of cheerfulness begin to happen. Such cheerfulness is not only a state of mind, it is a tool to cut through your I wantness. When we become cheerful, we have to let go of that feeling of poverty and wantingness. And so he used to just sit in his chair and look at us all and say, please cheer up, please cheer up. And, and this brings simplicity in your life, this attitude of awareness. You eat when you eat, you sit when you sit, you walk when you walk. That's the simplicity, because you're not doing two things at once. You're not thinking about something else while you do this. So your life becomes much simpler. Simplicity produces a kind of purity, a total atmosphere of awareness. Now, this may come and go, but you can always, when you remember, tune into it. That's what mindfulness truly means, remembering to come back into awareness, tuning into it. So there's really no need to reflect or perseverate about things. You live in a total atmosphere of awareness. You don't need to reflect on things, and there is no need for feedback. Feedback, when you want feedback, you're always looking for reassurance because you're insecure. You're feeling, I want more security, help me. This I becomes invalid, out of order. It's dismissed. You sack yourself. Sack yourself, fire yourself, from the job. Therefore, want is no longer workable. It is too obsolete. He says that is a basic understanding of egolessness. Rather than discussing it philosophically, I think the best way to understand egolessness is from the point of view of practice. For then you see that it is possible. Just like at night, when you come back from those anxious dreams into awareness of the breath. That's a very primitive form of it, but it really works. You aren't just reducing yourself into nothing. Rather, strength and energy arise, but not from me and not from want. They're already here. You're tuning into them. They're free. They're airy. They're fresh. You could be a really free person, completely, fundamentally free. And this produces tremendous fresh air and freedom, in which is all of which comes about from mindfulness and awareness, from shamatha and vipassana. So we practice as much as we can on the cushion, and then when you get up in life, you walk around in your house, in the streets, you come back to shamatha and vipassana. You can walk down the street and use the steps as you would the breath. Left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot, whatever it may be. Or you can use vipassana. You come back aware of the whole street. He says you could be a really fully free person, completely fundamentally free. So prajna is closely connected with freedom and with the practice of awareness and watchfulness. This is what prajna is. Prajna means superintelligence. Pra is an intensifier. Jnana is the root of the word to know. And we can only experience prajna when we come back from the dreams of I and other. He says ego, in order to establish itself, has to fight for every inch, occupy territory, proclaim warfare. There's always an undercurrent of trying to prove something, to achieve something. It involves macho-ness, self-promotion. You're trying to occupy territory, make yourself into a big deal, be admired, be loved, be rich, acquire things, whatever it might be. There's always an undercurrent of trying to prove something, to achieve something. With mindfulness and awareness, you realize there is no need to fight or wage warfare, because you can be really smart and really competent in this awake, aware world. The development of awareness and discipline produces tremendous relaxation, gentleness, and peace. They were in us already, these things, but we lost track of them through the anxiety of ego, the anxiety of I want, I hope, I fear, I'm afraid, I need, I. He says, we realize we are capable of freeing ourselves from ourselves. This is really, that's such a profound way of putting it. Freeing ourselves from ourselves. We are letting go of all the little tricks we might have, and we have lots of them. We're capable of being gentle, decent. We don't have to push so hard to maintain ourselves, which only makes us deaf, dumb, and blind. When we're pushing ourselves to maintain ourselves, we're missing so much of life. We could open our eyes and listen with our ears. We could feel the universe around us. This is why art and being an artist of one kind or another is so helpful on the path. We could actually relate to the world fully. Tremendous awakening for most of us. A glimpse of awakening. Relief produces relief from the stuffiness of self-consciousness. He says, we have developed prajna, and for the first time, you feel friendly toward yourself. But the first practices of shamatha and vipassana are learning how to handle yourself. Learning these techniques of working with your mind. Then, having learned how to relax and actually trust awareness, you come up with two problems. Who am I, which is the ego of self, and what's going on, which is the ego of dharmas. What's going on around me? You want to manipulate it, maintain it, make it better. So this is called the ego of self and the ego of dharmas. So sometimes there are problems with me, and sometimes there are problems with mine, the things of mine that I own. Together they're non-peace, turbulence, because we're always trying to manipulate the things of this world, the dharmas of this world. Dharmas has many meanings. In this instance, it means things, as it were, events that arise. And we're always trying to manipulate them to benefit I, ego. And that is ego. That's the way ego works. Ego, when you stop doing that, ego disappears. Ego is the constant manipulation relationship between this and that. He says, Shiva, peace, transcends both forms of ego. It produces relaxation, presence, non-hassle. It says, no, there is nothing you can find that is I at all. You can't find it. It's just a dream, just a thought. It is made out of the four marks: empty, impermanent, suffering, and egoless. These are the four marks of existence. The point is that there is nothing you can find that is I at all. It's just a dream, a mental creation that is full of anxiety and tension and happens from time to time in our minds. Oftentimes it's happening all the time, not continuously, because it can't. Just like these words, it has a beginning and an end. He says, fundamentally, it's all this going back and forth, there's nothing real taking place at all. Relaxation and relief take place as you realize that, after all, I don't need to play this game. You'd be surprised. You can experience self without a reference point. What he means is you can experience this reality here and now, without I and other. Ultimately, nothing is real. It's a temporary experience, fading every instant, just like this image on the computer screen, into nothing. This is why egolessness is possible, because everything, instant by instant, is fading into nothing. You feel everything as surface, as waves, floating back and forth continuously, but none of it is true or real. It's just this, what we're experiencing in the moment. Things come and go. Nothing is real but the awakening, the touch that wakes you up out of the dream. So you're lost in a dream, and then something wakes you up and brings you back into the moment. So I doesn't exist, and you can't say I've achieved egolessness. As soon as you say it, I disappears. It's gone. Due to emptiness and impermanence, you can't actually pinpoint anything at all. We live in this constant, changing flux right now. You can't pinpoint. Shunyata includes everything. It is empty. Empty of what? Empty of true existence of any kind. And completely full at the same time. Look at this. We're living in this immense fullness. It's not a matter of counting, but of catching up with your present moment, right where you are. This is perfect zero. He talked about the difference between false zero and perfect zero. False zero is relative to one or something, 2, 3, 4. It's in contrast to it. That's a false zero. It says nothing which is something because it's in contrast, compared to, relative to. True zero is this right here. Letting go of everything. And it's everything at the same time. So he says higher level of prajna, intelligence, super intelligence, is like a sword that says cut both edges, cut the sword itself. Yeah, the technique gets in the way and you just let it go. The technique of, oh, I should be aware, and then that'll get in your way. You could trip over your feet while you're thinking about being aware, and then you let it go and you're here. It's a sword that cuts itself. He says, but at the level of prajna swordsmanship, you need to commit harakiri, killing yourself, killing the self-consciousness. You cut this and that, and you commit seppuku, which is killing yourself, killing ego. Ouch, he says. The notion of egolessness is empty, but at the same time it is utterly and completely full. Egoless is empty of I, and it's full of this world, everything that's revealed. Egolessness is not a loss. It's a fullness. And then he says, I've experienced it. It is not deprivation at all, egolessness. It is like giving birth, an expression of both loss and gain together. That's an interesting one. It is full and empty at the same time. The woman loses and gains the child, loses it from her body and has it in her arms. It is full and empty at the same time. This is precisely the experience of egolessness. It is a very moving experience, he said. You could feel you could cry and laugh at the same time. Losing I and gaining all of this. You could cry because you were lost, and you could laugh because you have gained something. And you do that over and over again. It's not a one-time thing. We constantly come back to this. You cry, laugh, but nothing actually is new. Everything happens all over again. It is the same old world. This can be read over and over. So at first, you have to learn how to stop and be bored, how to sit, how to renounce entertainment. If that isn't taking place, there's no prajna. So without meditation experience, there is no prajna. You need this gut level experience. so we can have a discussion. Hi! You can wake up. He used to do that once in a while. Fred.
That you doing that, it woke me up in a dream once. You were wearing like the Padmasambhava ornaments, and you did like what I forget, like what's the Tibetan sound to the cut through, the Tibetan word for cutting. It's like drip or dree. I can't remember. That just reminded me of that. Like I got a question on boredom. My son, the one who sometimes chimes in a discussion group, I'm trying to teach him meditation. He's about 10. And I say to him, I'm like, when I take away the iPad, I'm like, guess what? We're going to just sit and practice being bored. And I don't know if that's going to get like a positive seed for meditation. He looks at it positively or not, and that's my concern, that I was just thinking about with that last line there.
In Tibet, they were careful about when they introduced meditation to a child. Generally around 9 years old, but it depends on the particular individual too, because they wanted to make sure that the ego had formed properly, fully, before you begin to undo it with meditation. If you start too soon, before the individual is ready, confident, all here, you can actually damage the person, make it harder for them to achieve understanding and egolessness. So Trungpa Rinpoche didn't start really meditating until he was about 9. I mean, he did some meditation before that because they thought, this guy's, he's an incarnate, he's a guru, he's a tulku, They were constantly after him to remember his previous lives, as monks were. They wanted proof. They wanted to see him remember stuff. So anyhow, that's the general rule.
So like a ripe ego would be looking for constant entertainment, iPad, wanting to be entertained, right?
Sure, because ego's full of anxiety.
Yeah.
And you want some distraction from that. You want to be absorbed in something else. You want relief. Television, entertainment, all of that. It's our job to cut through that as adults. Come back over and over again.
For your son, Fred, you might want to consider an alternative to the word boredom and perhaps introduce the meditation cushion as a special place where he could just rest and be peaceful for a little bit. No worries, no hassles. Just, no garbage, at least for a minute. You could just rest here.
Yeah, that's
So with a child, maybe do it for very short periods of time. Make it easier.
It's good advice. Thank you.
So that it doesn't become torture.
Yeah, that's the concern, right? To give like just a glimpse of a positive experience of, okay, look, you could relax doing this, you know, and to show them that.
Little kids have got plenty of worries. They've got tons of anxiety. It's amazing. And if you were to introduce it as a place where all of that can be left behind, that would really work. I'll never forget camping with my daughter when she was about 11 or 12, backpacking with her. And she was saying to me one night, you know what I love best about backpacking? And I would say, what, Whit? She said, and this is like an 11-year-old kid, I can leave all my worries behind.
Wow. You could write a song. Anybody. Now we could end early too.
Oh, maybe they had a comment.
Yeah, it's the hospital.
Oh.
The joys of old age. Endless trips to the doctor.
They're looking for payment.
Yeah, who knows? There's ego complaining.
Someone said to me once years ago, don't become one of these old men that just spends all day talking about your illnesses.
And here it's happened.
Oops, damn.
But Sarah, go ahead. You had your hand up.
Um, I think I've asked this before, but I seem to be kind of stuck on this when I'm going about my day and I'm lost in thoughts, and I'll become aware of it, and I'll use the thought that this is all a dream to remind me to come back. But I think, Don, after hearing what you're talking about when you're trying to go to sleep, maybe using the breath instead, since that's not even a thought at all, that's just putting my attention on the breath, may be more powerful in the moment.
It can also be helpful to label it like, oh, thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Just don't do it while you're driving your car.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Maybe when I'm driving in the car, I can say, this is just a dream. But
I think it's useful to have several different techniques because life presents with all kinds of things. You know, if nothing else works, you can think of Shantideva, just be a log. You can get all the way back down to that level.
It's really so interesting, how our neurotic mind, our fearful neurotic mind about I, clogs things up. Yeah, I used to be a devoted rock climber. Spent a big portion of my life on walls, um, hundreds of feet off the ground. And it's a given. I remember I was working with this guy. We were top roping a very difficult problem. Sometimes what you do is you you have a problem where you know you might fail, maybe even you think you will. And what you do is you put up what's called a top rope. You get up above this problem and fix an anchor, and you run ropes through it. And then you get back down on the ground. The guy who's going to try the problem ties in with his harness, ties into the rope, and the guy standing next to him puts his end of the rope through a brake that is attached to his waist. And then as the climber goes up, the guy standing on the ground is taking in the rope. So the rope is going up and back down to the guy who's taking it in. And as the climber goes up, if he falls, he's not going to go anywhere because the rope is going up to this pulley up above him and back down to the guy on the ground, right? So it's a very safe way of trying hard problems. And I was doing it with a guy, a friend of mine, who was an excellent climber. And he tried this problem and did it. And I went up and I tried it and I failed. And I swung on the rope. What it was the rope went up at an angle to the pulley, you might call it, and then back down the other way. So if I fell, I was going to swing, and I did. And I swung back to where the route was and tried it again. It fell again. Tried it 2 or 3, 4 times. I can't remember anymore. And finally, he lowered me off. He let out the rope and I came down. And he said, "You know what you were doing wrong?" And I thought he was going to tell me I should have been moving my right hand here, my left hand there, my foot the other place. And I said, "No, tell me." And he said, "You were wondering if you could do it." When you're doing a level of difficulty of that athleticism, you don't even think. You just do it. Confidence is everything. I used to watch a guy bouldering. Bouldering is when you climb without ropes at all to protect you. So you do it ideally close enough to the ground. You've got difficult problems close enough to the ground that if you fail, you can fall off, jump off, and land on the ground. People stretch that pretty far. Sometimes they get up pretty darn high without a rope. I knew this guy. His name was Skip Guerin. I was about 30. He was about 18. He was a wizard boulderer. He just floated across the rock. They're the most difficult problems, movement problems. And I knew that there was not a thought in his mind. There was nothing going on just saying, "This is difficult. I wonder if I can do this." You can't be thinking those kinds of things. And this is what we're being enjoined to do with shamatha and vipassana, to come completely into confidence. Trungpa Rinpoche, I keep quoting him, he said, "Self-doubt is the Buddhist version of original sin." And boy, can you see it in something like climbing, where you're doing these very difficult problems. That's what climbing was all about. Challenging yourself with the problems that were so hard to move. And if you're thinking, "I can't do this, I'm going to fail," you will. No.
One of the questions I have is
What?
one of the questions I have, John, is who is telling me to count the breath or to come back in awareness, because I do have those thoughts to say, "Hey, count the breath," or ride the breath out, or come back into awareness. Who is that saying that? Would ego even want me to do that?
Yes, it's ego.
It is ego telling me to count the breath.
Yes, ego tells you to meditate. But then when you do it, ego has to get out of the way.
Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Don't you think? Everybody? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
If ego's there, it screws it up. Just like trying that boulder problem, that watching that guy Skip Garron. If I'm sitting there thinking, I think I can do this, gets in the way.
Ego telling me to log on to the meditation at 6:50 or 7 o'clock, but then the meditation itself is cutting through the ego, removing the ego and hacking away at the ego.
Absolutely. Every time you come present, every time you are aware of the breath, ego is evaporated for however long. It might just be an instant, might be a while. And more, we learn how to relax into awareness. Athletes call this flow state of just confidence. Confidence is everything. Lack of confidence, everything goes to hell.
Is the goal to eliminate ego entirely, or to just have it under control or at bay?
Eventually, one learns that ego was a myth. It was, as Trungpa Rinpoche once bellowed at me, I started to say, well, don't you sort of need it, in order to balance your bank account and, make a right turn when you need to make a right turn in your car? And he leaned forward and he yelled at me, ego is a lie. It's a lie. And when we begin to realize that it's a lie, well, you don't believe a lie. It evaporates by itself. You can't force it, because that's ego again. It's realizing the truth of it. Then it goes, because you're not going to walk around telling yourself something you know is untrue.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is the wisdom of the path.
So we're growing the confidence that ego is a lie.
Yes, that's what we're working on. It's just a game, as he puts it, in this chapter. It's a game. It's a game of maintaining itself by creating a false problem. Worrying, do we have enough money? That's a good one. Ego latches onto that. All kinds of worries.
Sometimes it's useful to look at things from the other side. So John was pointing out a while ago that as your ego diminishes, your world expands. And any one of you can look back, most of you have been meditating for years now, a few years or longer. You can look back a year, 2 years, 3 years, not at your ego, but at the rest of your life. And just think, am I more available to other people? Is the world more apparent to me? And the answer clearly is going to be yes, 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 yes. And sometimes we need to look, we need to ask ourselves that question and pay attention, because that progress has been made. If you don't believe me, do this thought experiment right now. Consider resting in open awareness. When you started to meditate 2, 3, 4 years ago, could you possibly have done that? But now, right, you just go there. So that's like moving across a rock face without thinking about it. So you guys are all making remarkable progress. So I'm hearing a lot of one side of the view here, but there's the other side of the view as well, and it's important to keep that in focus.
I think that the progress comes almost in spite of us, that you don't see it happening when it's there. And it's not a big deal. If it's a big deal, then there's too much ego involved. A lot of people haven't spoken. Karen Sue, it's going through your alleged mind. Where did I hear that? That was my father. He used to say that to me. He said, "What's on your alleged mind?" And he wasn't a Buddhist.
Oh, wow. This really I I I finished my dinner and I looked at the clock and it said 7:25 and I said, "Ooh, I'm going to go to Thursday night." The Thursday night session, which I don't often come to, and that's it. It's just how it's um, it's all there and it's all here, and I'm so grateful that I came in light of what we um, read on Tuesday and talked about yesterday, and um, yes.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, thank you. I don't always get here on a Thursday, either came in late from work. Somebody took me on a very steep and difficult trail with lots of rocks the other day. She's very experienced athlete. She's like, just watch where I place my feet. And at first I hesitated. I was thinking, oh, I don't know. But I realized if I had focused on the steepness and the size of the rocks, I couldn't have done it. And coming down was much harder than going up. And something I've used in the past is I have a mantra. Each footstep, left foot, blessing, right footstep, blessing, right, left foot, blessing, right foot, blessing. I watched where she placed her feet, but there was a certain rhythm to my silent mantra. And I thought, I stopped thinking, basically. And when I got to the bottom, I was like, wow. But as soon as I think about it, going, this is tough. This is going to be really tough. I won't get the first step even. And it takes a few minutes. It takes a few steps. That's okay. It was like a dream. It was simple. And Sarah, I would ask you, when you skin up the mountain in the dark, you're not thinking about it. I would guess you just go up, take off the skins, come down. Enjoy it. Enjoy the ride. Thank you.
Well, Valerie, that was great. Thanks for sharing. I know you do some writing, and I know that anybody who does writing for long enough runs into writer's block. What you're just describing is the way to deal with writer's block.
Next challenge.
Yeah, the same. Just use the same technique.
Mhm. Natalie Goldberg talks about that. She's a writing coach.
I know her name. Yeah, I read one or two of her books a long time ago. She's been doing it for a while. So just for fun, I'm going to cold call Dan, who looks like a man who needs a grandchild.
Grandpa.
You're muted.
Yeah. Was that a question? I'm sorry, I missed it. My volume is.
It's a general opening.
To me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was just a general opening to you if you had anything you wanted to contribute.
Oh, yeah.
Always worth listening to, and you haven't said anything tonight or last night or the night before, but
Yeah.
who's counting, right?
I'm listening, I guess. I think I have primary grandparental preoccupation.
That's understandable.
No, but I'm
How's
taking.
everyone doing?
Yeah. He's doing well. He has a name. Did I tell everyone that? Yeah.
Yeah, it was Oliver, right?
Oliver. Yes. Yes. I appreciate the asking. Yeah.
My son's name too.
Yeah. One thing I can say is though it's I guess I'm struggling with the balance of wanting to be there for them and then not wanting to be intrusive too. So that's my
It's a
ego.
fine line.
Yeah, yeah. And it's definitely getting my ego involved, even more, making it more complicated than it is at times. And when I come back to what it is, there are no problems right now, right?
I'm encouraging everybody to, I put the website name whenyoudie.org. Take a look if you wish. At any of the films, but the third one is out. It's all put together by, well, a lot of it by Dharma practitioners. James Hoagland, along with Johanna Lund and some others. So maybe we should be end, or anybody have something burning to contribute?
Miriam has her hand up. Yeah.
Oh, good. Miriam.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I've been resisting the self-imposed pressure to contribute something because I'm working on dissolving my ego. So I was just noticing during this question period, about, and especially some silences where normally, well, I always have something to say, but this time I thought, okay, no, this is self-imposed, but there is no self, or this is really just a thought. And so I made an effort not to participate. I just,
Oh,
well, no, I didn't have anything burning to say, but it made me aware of how there is this sort of internal pressure that I put on myself to, contribute to, and I usually find something that I'm interested in, but this was more trying to be comfortable without talking. And that was hard for me, to be comfortable just being and not giving in to a rule of mine. So thank you for the exercise.
Well, I was going to call on you after Dan.
Well, see, and all right, well, there we go. It's hard. It's hard not to be self-conscious. Yeah.
I encourage everybody in here to experience solitary retreat. It's probably one of the most powerful meditation experiences you can experience. And if you are interested, you can talk to me about it. I would very much recommend, if you can, doing a group retreat, like for a week before you do solitary, but sometimes you can't. And then you just do it for a very short time, like a day or two or three at the most, because you don't want to fail. And while there are people who can just go in and not fail, you never know. But it is an experience that most people have never had, of really being alone and without entertainment. When you go into retreat, Trungpa Rinpoche used to say, you just eat, shit, sleep, and meditate. So you don't take books to read. You might take one book and just read a little bit, like for 5-10 minutes at night before you go to sleep, if you wish. There's no writing, certainly no music. You do it in a safe place, and take your food with you. You want to have safety and quiet. And you meditate a lot. And you're alone. I mean, most people have never been alone for any length of time. So it's a very interesting experience. And it will deepen, I think, can deepen your understanding of meditation. Well, we ought to end. Let's see, Sarah, do you want to do the chants? I'll put them up. Okay, I'll put them up and I'll mute everybody. I'm going to mute all. Hold on a second. So Sarah, unmute yourself.
We will close with a prayer for peace, and then by dedicating the merit by our practice and study for the benefit of all sentient beings. By the blessings of enlightened and compassionate ones, by the power of my positive actions of 3 times, and my prayers of pure aspiration, may wars, conflicts, epidemics, and all other maladies dissolve in this world, and may the earth and all who live on this earth enjoy the abundance of well-being. May all learn to live lovingly with each other. By this merit may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigden's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory. Thank you, Philip. Thank you, John. Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Everyone,
Thank
sleep
you.
well.
Everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.
Night.
John, you're
You're
muted.
muted.
You
Mute.
are muted, John.
Still muted.
Sorry.
You're
Yeah.
About those last two chants. The first one is about when you meditate, compassion develops. The desire to be of service and help and love other people.
Mhm.
The second one is about how the world becomes beautiful as you come back into the present moment. That's what those two chants are invoking.
Mhm.
Well, great to see everybody.
You too.
Yes. Good night, all.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.